You're alive, until he looks at you. Then, footsteps in the corridor, the door, hands, a sack, the stairs down. You're dead. It doesn't matter who you were yesterday. A nobleman, a servant, a close friend. Everyone became a corpse, and not because they deserved it, but because the system demanded sacrifices. Every day, every hour. Ivan created the Oprichnina, not an army, not a service. A gangster clan at court. They wore black, rode black horses. On their saddles, a dog's head. On their belts, a broom. Symbols, purging, annihilation. They came at night, without an order, without a trial, without an investigation. They led people to the square, slashed, burned, stabbed, all of it, on a single command, only because the Tsar said so. You'd think, if you didn't do anything, you're safe. You're wrong. The Tsar's trust is a death sentence. The closer you are to him, the sooner he sees the enemy. In you, in your gaze, in your silence, in the way you hold your hands. One look, and you are no longer the same. One gesture, and you have already betrayed. You'd want to run. It won't work. All roads are controlled. All cities, under surveillance. Every peasant, every monk, every drunk in a tavern could be an informant. A denunciation is currency. You can buy forgiveness with it. You can remove an enemy with it. You can survive with it. Would you denounce someone? Of course. Someone has already denounced you. You'd try to prove your loyalty. You'll bring a gift. You'll speak flattery. You'll bow lower. It's useless. The man who received favors yesterday is impaled today. The man who saved the Tsar's life is in the dungeon tomorrow. You don't believe it? Look at Metropolitan Philip. He was a saint. He was respected. He dared to speak the truth. They strangled him, threw his body in a swamp. You'd stay silent. Silence is also a crime. You'd speak. Words are a trap. You'd sit. Sitting is a sign of pride. You'd stand. Standing is a sign of readiness to rebel. All paths lead to the dungeon. There is no light there, only screaming, and the smell of rotting flesh. There they impale you. There they flay your skin. There they pour wax on you. And while you scream, they count how many minutes you'll last. It's a game. You are the pawn. You'd think, I just want to survive. Here, you cannot want. You can only serve. And to serve means to disappear. Because everyone who served, sooner or later, disappeared. The most terrifying thing is not the torture, not the death, but that you yourself become part of the machine. You see your friend being taken away, and you don't say a word. Because if you speak, you'll be taken next. You write a denunciation, not because you hate, but because if you don't write it, they will write one about you. You become part of the system, to survive. And at that moment, you are already dead. Heart pounding, palms sweaty, throat dry. This isn't a movie. This is an instruction manual, and you are already inside. They called it disfavor, but disfavor is when you are suspended, when your rank is taken, when they say, leave. This wasn't disfavor. This was a machine, launched at midnight, with one setting, annihilation. Ivan wasn't afraid of enemies. He was afraid of silence. Because in the silence he heard footsteps, the footsteps of those he had killed, the footsteps of those he had betrayed, the footsteps of those who were closest to him. And to drown out that silence, he created noise. The noise of falling bodies, the noise of breaking doors, the noise of screams cut off mid-word. He chose 1,000 men, not warriors, not officials, men he, for one day, trusted, gave them lands, palaces, money, and black cloaks, and the right to kill, not by order, but simply because they felt like it. They lived separately, in their own city, in the Alexandrov settlement. There were no laws there. There were rules. First, loyalty to the Tsar. Second, fear of him. Third, no one knows who is next. They rode on horseback, on black horses, on their saddles, a dog's head, not as decoration, as a warning. We are hounds. We bite. We do not choose. They came at night. Didn't knock. Broke down doors with axes. Led people out into the street. Asked, "Where's the money? Where are the weapons? Where is the conspiracy?" You'd say, "I have nothing." They'd laugh. Because for them, "I have nothing" is already proof of guilt. And here's where it gets interesting. They didn't just kill. They made you choose. Who to kill, your father or your son? Who to betray, your wife or your friend? You'd think, "I'll stay silent." And they'd take your son, put him on his knees, and look you in the eye. Would you have stayed silent? Imagine. You're asleep, in your house, in your bed, and suddenly, stomping. The creak of stairs. Cold air in the room. You don't have time to get up. A hand on your throat. A sack over your head. And a voice. You are in disfavor. There was no trial, no accusation, no appeal. There was only a label, like a brand, like a verdict written in advance. But who wrote it? Not Ivan, not the Oprichniki. You. You wrote it every time you stayed silent, watching your neighbor being taken away. Every time you thought, "Just not me." You wrote it when you took the quill and wrote a denunciation. Not because you hated, but because you knew, if not you, then you. The system of denunciations isn't a tool of power. It's an engine of fear. Every letter, like a drop of poison. You don't see it working, but a week later, the whole house is rotting from the inside. Letters went directly to the settlement, not through the chancellery, not through the boyars, through walls, through spies, through the wife who fears her husband, through the servant who wants to become the master. And then you understand, you don't live in a country, you live in a trap, where every breath is a risk, every word is evidence, every glance is an accusation. In this world there are no innocent, only those who haven't been taken yet. 1, 2, 3. You didn't count because to count means to acknowledge it's a system. And if it's a system, then you can learn the rules. And if you can learn them, then you can survive. A lie. You'd think a denunciation is an exception, that someone wrote in the heat of the moment, that the Tsar read it, that the execution was a mistake. It's not like that. A denunciation is currency, like gold, like land, like an enemy's head on a pike. You give one thing, you get another. Not morality, not truth, but a rank, a palace, the right not to fear the next night. Would you file a complaint against your neighbor? What if you were given his estate for it? What if your son received a court rank? What if your wife stopped looking at you like a coward? You'd write, and you'd write not because you hated, but because the system paid. Like TikTok reports on a user, so a boyar denounced a boyar, an algorithm. The more denunciations, the higher in the feed, the higher, the more trust. And trust from Ivan isn't flattery, it's the blood of another. He didn't read every letter. There was no need. He created a machine that feeds itself. You write, "I live." I write, "You're dead." All in a circle, and every circle, a new level of paranoia. You'd try to check who was denouncing? It won't work. Letters went to the settlement, not through the post, not through couriers, through secret passages, through monks who prayed for the Tsar, through maidservants who served wine. You didn't know who was writing, but you knew who was next, because everyone who stayed silent was already under suspicion. Silence is also a denunciation against yourself. You'd want to stay on the sidelines? Impossible. The court is an arena. If you don't kill, you are killed. If you don't eat, you are eaten. Did you see how Metropolitan Philip spoke the truth? His body still lies in a swamp. Did you see how Prince Kurbsky fled? His estate was burned. His wife was hanged. His children were sold into slavery. Do you think they were guilty? No, they were the first. And the first are always an example. And here's where it gets interesting. You didn't perish because of guilt. You perished because of profit. Someone got your house. Someone took your place. Someone is now sleeping in your bed. And that someone will definitely write a denunciation to prove that he is not like you, that he is loyal, that he is not a traitor. The system didn't punish the guilty. It rewarded the killers. And the more you killed, the closer to the throne. A denunciation isn't a weapon against enemies. It's a ladder, and every rung made of bones. Would you have survived? No, because the survivors are those who denounced. And you, if you denounced, you hadn't survived. You became part of the machine, and the machine has no right to regret. Look here. This isn't history. This is a blueprint, and it's still working. He saw treason in every glance, in every rustle, in every sigh, too long for peace. Chronicle, 1570. Full moon, cold, a scream. The Tsar gets out of bed, barefoot, with a torch, runs down the corridor, shouts, "They've come. They're in the castle." There's no one, only shadows, and the echo of his own footsteps. Not a tyrant, not a despot. Diagnosis, paranoia with fits of rage. A brain like a booby-trapped room. Every sound, an explosion. Every face, the mask of an enemy. You'd think, he's gone mad. You're wrong. He was in his right mind, in his own, where logic is torture, where trust is a trap, where love is a weakness that must be cut out. Once he struck his son, not for words, not for an action, for a glance, for standing too close to the window, for the shadow of doubt in his eyes. He struck him with his staff, in the temple, and watched as his son fell, as the blood flowed across the floor. He didn't stop, kept beating, until it was quiet. Now tell me, if his own son is a target, who can be safe? Not a friend, not an ally, not a confidant. The next victim isn't a person. The next victim is an entire class. Ivan didn't just fear the boyars. He knew they are stronger. They have lineages. They have connections. They have the memory of who he was before the throne. He, a usurper in their eyes. He, the boy they tolerated. And now, the Tsar they silently hate. And he saw that hatred. In every bow. In every Your Majesty. In every gift. Too expensive to be sincere. So he didn't fight treason. He cut out the root. Not the guilty. Everyone. He started with Novgorod. You'd think the city rebelled? No. It was simply rich and old and had customs not in agreement with the Tsar. That means a conspiracy. That means execution. He sent the Oprichniki, not an army, hounds. They came at dawn, broke down doors, led families out to the square, asked, "Who is the head?" Pointed to the father, cut off his nose, then his ears, then his stomach. Children were impaled before their mother's eyes, then the mother, then the house, burned it, then the church, then the cemetery. Nothing must remain, not memory, not ashes. You'd say, this is madness. No, this is a system. There is no place for emotions in it, only the goal, destroy what could grow. Power does not tolerate a shadow, even if the shadow is from its own hand. He didn't believe in loyalty. He believed in fear, and fear is the only language he understood people in. Therefore, every audience at the throne is a test. You enter, you bow, you wait. Suddenly, a shout. You were whispering with Kurbsky. You say, I haven't seen him in 10 years. Then you were planning it, and they lead you away. Without a trial, without an investigation. You are already dead, even before the sack is pulled over your head. You'd want to prove you're not. Guilty? Impossible. Guilt doesn't require proof. It is the premise. You are alive, therefore you can change. Therefore you are a threat, and a threat is destroyed. That's how psychosis on the throne works. Not a monster, not a dictator. A man who knows if he stops, they will devour him. And to not stop, he moves forward. Through corpses, through cities, through his own children. Look here. This isn't history. This is an algorithm. And it's still running. They didn't just kill boyars. They excised the system. Like a surgeon. Cancer. Only the scalpel was made of iron. And the hand trembled with rage. You'd think, this is revenge? No. This is accounting. 70% of the executed, over 14 months. 800 people. all with titles, all with lands, all with lineages older than the Tsar himself. Killed a boyar, took his patrimonial estate, took the estate, became richer, became stronger. Now you have no support, no counsel, no memory of how they lived before you. Imagine they arrest the CEO, lead him out of the office, take his shares, property, data, and then they say, "We have cleansed the company." The same thing, only instead of an office, a state, instead of shares, villages, instead of data, souls. The Tsar wasn't afraid of conspiracies. He was afraid of equals, and there were no equals. There were landowners. They decided who would become a military commander, who would marry whose daughter, who would gain access to trade routes. He was Tsar by blood, they by influence. And then he took the step that every businessman understands. If you can't buy them, destroy them, and take the assets. He didn't rob, he requisitioned everything by decree. Everything from God. Everything in the name of order. Lands passed to the Tsar, peasants into serfs, palaces into the treasury, and the corpses onto stakes along the roads. You'd say, this is meaningless. You're wrong. Every corpse is a billboard. This is what happens to those who think they own something. Power does not share. It consumes. And here's where it gets interesting. He didn't just remove the elite. He replaced it. Instead of boyars, Oprichniki, not nobles, not from ancient families, people from the dirt, those whom he chose, those who depended on him 100%. Without him, nothing. With him, everything. He created a new aristocracy on the blood of the old. Their wealth, his gift, their position, his will, their survival, his whim. And now you understand, he wasn't going mad. He was calculating. Every ruble, every tithe of land, every body on a stake is a tax that no longer needs to be paid to the old power. You'd want to believe this is madness? This is strategy. Destroyed the elite, took the lands, strengthened his power, became the only one. And when the people see a prince burning in his own house, they don't see a murder. They see God has punished the proud man. Because the Tsar said, it is God's will. Because the priests pray for the Tsar. Because every corpse has a placard, traitor. Would you doubt? You would already be gone. Doubt is also an asset, and it is confiscated. The camera slowly rises. Bodies on stakes. Crows. Not an execution. A show. Like gladiators for the masses. Would you watch or look away? And if you didn't look away, would you be next? The square is full. People stand with children in their arms. Not in fear, not in anger, in a stupor. Because this is no longer horror. This is order. This is how life is arranged. They brought the condemned out at dawn, not in a cart, not in chains, on a white horse, dressed in rich clothes, as if for a festival, and they forced them to sing, forced them to laugh, forced them to bow to the people, because the spectacle must be bright, because blood is not the end, it's the scenery. Then, the knife, slowly, along the stomach, not killing them immediately, kept them on the edge, so the scream would last longer, so the viewers would see how a person dies. You'd think, this is torture for the victim. You're wrong. This is training for the crowd. Every scream, a lesson. You are not a person. You are a spectator. And the spectator must remain silent. Otherwise, you are the next star of the show. They didn't just kill, they performed a ritual, their own mass. On the altar, a body. On the shroud, blood. And the Tsar, like a priest, giving a blessing for death. You'd want not to come? Impossible. You would have been summoned. And if you didn't come, your house would be burned first. Because absence is also a gaze, and a gaze is treason. Imagine you're standing in the crowd. Next to you, your neighbor. Yesterday he denounced his cousin. Today he is on his knees. His hands are cut off. His mouth is sewn shut. And he is looking at you. You don't look away. Because if you do, it means you knew. It means you are an accomplice. It means you tomorrow. They taught you to watch, not to blink, not to whimper, because weakness is a contagion. And contagion is cut out. You'd think this is the end? No, this is the beginning. Because when horror becomes a show, it ceases to be horror. It becomes the norm. And then you yourself begin to wait for the next performance. With interest. With hope that this time, it won't be you. That's how humanity dies. Not in a scream, not in pain. In the silence when you watch, and don't look away. You thought the law was a wall? No, it is fabric. And when it tears, you don't hear it. There was no trial, no investigation, no appeal. There was only him, and his will, and his anger. Imagine the president decides. The vice president is dead. A shot in the office. The body is carried out. No one calls the police, because the police are his, and the court is his, and the Constitution, a piece of paper he burns in the fireplace. That's how it worked. Not a system, but personal will. Not law, but a glance. One glance, and you are already outside the law. Because the law is what he said 5 minutes ago. And 5 minutes ago he said, everyone has betrayed. You'd want a lawyer? You didn't have a case. You were already sentenced. Even before you were born. Because your father was a boyar. Because your wife is from a family that didn't bow low enough. Because your servant wrote, he whispers at night. And here's where it gets interesting. He didn't just destroy people. He destroyed the very possibility of resistance. All roads led to him. All decisions. Through him. All lives. By his sign. You'd say, but there were officials, chancelleries, orders? Yes. And they all worked in a vacuum. Like servers showing status online, but are actually empty. A formality. A wrapper. So the world would think, it's all according to the rules. And the rules were simple. You live. As long as he doesn't desire your death, you are rich. As long as he doesn't want your lands, you are strong. As long as he doesn't decide you are too close. And then you understand. This isn't despotism. This is the annulment of reality. As if every day they rebooted the universe. And in the new version, you are the enemy. Without a reason, without warning, without a chance. You'd try to negotiate. With whom? With a system where a contract is a denunciation. You'd seek justice. In a court where the judge writes the verdict before the trial begins. You'd believe in order. In a world where order is a scream that is cut off behind the dungeon wall. Look here, this isn't about history. It's about structure. Power that is not shared, not controlled, not limited, is not power. It becomes a natural phenomenon, like an earthquake, like a fire. You don't argue with lightning. You don't ask a hurricane for permission to survive. You just wait and hope it doesn't strike you. And here's where it gets interesting. You stop being human. You become a variable. In an equation where the answer is always the same, death. And then you learn not to live. You learn not to die. Day after day, glance after glance, silence after silence. And when does it all end? Never. Because fear, ingrained in the flesh, doesn't disappear with the death of a czar. It is passed on, like a gene, like a curse, and we still feel it, in every step down an empty corridor, in every sound behind a door, in every silence, too long for peace. The Oprichnina ended. The czar died. The Oprichniki vanished. Cities were rebuilt. But you still feel it, in the back of your head, in your neck, in every sound behind a door. It didn't go away, it just changed form. You think this was back then? You're wrong. The same fear, the same logic. Only cameras instead of spies. Only a news feed instead of denunciations. Only your phone, like a viper in your pocket, listening to who called you. Repin's painting isn't history. It's a diagnosis. On it, not the Tsarevich. On it is you. In the father's eyes, in the hand, the staff, and a gaze in which there is no return. You look at the screen. You see one person get fired. Another, tried for a post. A third, disappears. And you don't speak. Because if you speak, you are next. And here's where it gets interesting. You are no longer a victim. You are an accomplice. Every silence like a denunciation, every like a signature, every averted glance like an admission of guilt. In Eisenstein's film, Not the Past, it's an instruction manual on creating fear, not through torture, through silence, through waiting, through the knowledge that at any moment the door will slam, and you are no longer the master of your life. You are an object, in a database, on a list, in a feed. You think you have a choice? You think you are free? Try saying out loud, "I disagree." See how many friends remain. See how your access changes. See how your phone number ends up in the right hands. The enemy within isn't a slogan. It's a machine. And it's still working. In school, in the office, in the family. Whoever doesn't praise is against. Whoever is silent is hiding something. Whoever doubts is betraying. You'd want to resist? First, you need to stop being afraid, and fear doesn't pass. It becomes ingrained in your genes, in your memory, in your instinct. You didn't learn it, you inherited it. Like a cough, like insomnia, like the habit of looking back on the stairs. Now that you've seen it all, understood the mechanism, the ritual, the lawlessness, the legacy, it's time to answer. Not what happened, but what would have happened to you. Would you have survived? No, because to survive means to denounce. And you, if you denounced, are no longer you. You are part of the system. And the system does not forgive awakening. You'd think this was in the 15th century. It just changed form. And it's watching you, right now, from the screen. Would you have survived? A second. Think. You're sitting, serving, smiling. And outside the door, black cloaks. You know them by their gait, by the sound of their boots on stone, by the way they don't breathe when they pass your room. They don't knock. They simply enter. And everything you've built collapses in 3 seconds. You'd say, "I was careful. I didn't criticize. I bowed the lowest. I gave gifts, prayed louder, cried when necessary." You're wrong. Caution doesn't save you. It only postpones the inevitable. Because you are alive, therefore, you can become an enemy. And to become an enemy means you are already guilty. Imagine you're eating dinner, a fork in your hand, hot soup, and suddenly you notice you're holding the fork wrong, not like the Tsar held it yesterday. Too late. A servant saw. He's already writing a letter, in the dark, with trembling hands. With one word, imitates. That's enough. You don't need to be a rebel. You don't need to raise an army. One gesture is enough. One glance at the Tsar in which there is a shadow of a question. Is he even in his right mind? That's it. You're already dead. You just haven't fallen yet. You'd want to run into the forest, to a monastery, abroad. It won't work. Your name is already on the list. Your house, under surveillance. Your servant has already denounced you. And even if you escape, they will hang your wife, burn your father, sell your children. That's the price. That's the system. You'd think, I'll just be silent. I won't participate. Silence is participation. You see an Oprichnina taking your friend away. You don't speak. Therefore you are not an enemy. Therefore you are permissible. And when they come for you, who will say a word? No one. Because everyone was silent when they came for others. Would you write a denunciation to save yourself, to get his land, to show that you are one of them? You would write, because if not you, then you. And so you are no longer a victim. You are an accomplice, and the machine feeds on you, from the inside. Would you withstand the torture when they flay your skin, when they pour wax on you, when they impale you? Not a question of strength, a question of time. Everyone breaks, not because they are weak, but because pain isn't a test. It's a tool, and it works. You'll start talking. First, about yourself. Then, about your friend. Then, about the dead. You'll name hundreds of names, innocent ones, because you want it to stop. And they will laugh, because they don't need truths. They need names. Any names. So the cogwheel keeps turning. And here's where it gets interesting. You didn't perish because of malice, not because of a mistake. You perished because of profit. Someone got your house. Someone took your place. Someone is now wearing your boots. and that someone will definitely write a denunciation to prove that he is not you, that he is loyal, that he is not a victim. That's how the system works. It doesn't punish the guilty. It rewards the killers. And the more you kill, the closer to the light. A denunciation isn't a weapon. It's an elevator. And every stop is on bones. Would you have survived? No. Because the survivors are those who denounced. And you, if you denounced, are no longer you. You became part of the machine, and the machine does not forgive awakening. Look here. This isn't the past. It's a mirror. You're sitting in the office. You see a colleague being fired. You stay silent. Because if you speak, you are next. You like a post where they call him a traitor. You watch the news where they say, he is to blame himself. You are already there. In that room, behind that door, in the shadow of a black cloak. Right, yes or no? But no, your answer speaks about you, not about Ivan. Because history doesn't tell, it tests. For strength, for honesty, for the ability to see how fear becomes the norm, and how easy it is to find yourself in that place where the door opens and those are already standing in the corridor, in black cloaks. Those who came not for an enemy, but for you.